Well, Mr. Thorne,
Hey,
as how are you doing? Thank you for joining me on this fine Wednesday morning. Well, Mr. Thorne,
well,
as
happy
how
to
are
be,
you doing?
happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, pretty much the reason why I want to bring you on is you're kind of a nerd, you're a college kid like me, believe it or not. And wanted to break down everything going on with all these craziness in the rosters and everything like that. Um, we've talked kind of offline and everything, and we've discuss pretty much everything going on as far as, you know, roster gymnastics, players, kind of being let to the side and whatnot, and kind of overall the lack of clarity that's been kind of going on throughout this whole process. Um, Obviously, James has, in my opinion, done a pretty decent job among other people who have just kind of been going through the weeds of getting everything. So, we see people coming in right now, appreciate it 100%. Um, if there's a player that anyone wants us to dive deeper into, please leave a comment or something like that. So, we can help you guys out. I'll be pulling up the rosters in a second. But Thorne, overall, what do you think about the process of this whole draft and everything like that?
Yeah, I think one of my bigger takeaways from this as a whole is this league is pretty stacked with talent to the point where I really feel like another 2 to 4 teams would have gone a long way because especially we'll get to it on the USFL side. There's a lot of notable names that I think were starters for 2 seasons and then now are gonna be a backup. And there's a lot of cases like that we'll get to. But in general, that's kind of the thought is like it's gonna make competition like there's gonna be a lot of parity, but also like man, there's a lot of talent on these rosters, almost too much.
Yeah, and I feel that personally, it's going to make it stronger, and I think that's kind of an easy cop out thing to say, but at the same time, the big elephant in the room is what's up with all the what's the word I'm saying? What's up with all like the opportunity that just went away? So I think that's something to be like really cognizant of and whatnot. As I pull up the team rosters and everything like that, let me go to the screen, the screen, the screen sharing situation. But as I pull that up, is there anyone like right off the bat that you're just kind of like, oh, okay, cool, like this guy type thing or anything like that, or you kind of just like riding the wave on everything?
Um, yeah, I mean, like certainly some teams have had some really interesting drafts. We'll get to them, but a team like Memphis and a few others really added it. There's some teams that had some really interesting decisions on who not to protect, which we'll also get to. But yeah, I don't think there's any like one piece that's like completely jumping out. But I think there's some teams that had some really interesting decisions that they've made.
Yeah, just get the I like to engage with everyone on the show and whatnot. You know, good morning, fellas. I'm curious on your takes on the quarterbacks that were selected. I mean, I'm more curious about the quarterbacks that weren't selected. Honestly, I think Quinn Dormandy is out there. Um, there was obviously not only selected but unprotected. There was obviously like De'Aaron King with all the nonsense going through him. I challenged De'Aaron on this. He just got a full time quarterback job at SMU. What are you going to do about recruiting? It's like it is not an easy job to be a full time quarterback coach, and I'm just kind of like, you can't really have your cake and eat it too, in my opinion. So maybe I'm out of line on that front, but I do think that he kind of might be biting off a little bit more than he could chew. But we'll see.
Yeah, I kind of think he's done. I don't really see him coming back at this point. I just don't see how you could balance those two.
Yeah,
But for a quarterback that I think the one that stuck out to me the most, that was the most curious, was Kirk Benkirk for San Antonio, because he said he was retired a few months ago and they protected him. So has he had a change of heart? Is he retired only from the NFL so he can do his betting stuff? I don't know. That's a curious decision. He was originally a roughneck last year under this coaching staff, so maybe that had something to do with it. But in general, that one was the one that I was like. Other than that, there wasn't a ton of surprises. But that one was really curious of why he got protected.
Yeah, and I mean, it's to me, it's kind of like maybe it's kind of a homey thing for lack of a better term. Like him, obviously AJ Smith likes him and everything like that. Mike comes in and says, "What about all the extra talent that's to drop in the NFL too?" I mean, I think that complicates things in a weird way. And when I say in a weird way, I think it complicates things because when you have the 16 original teams, right? That you have all these players and you have all these people that have been so invested into this, and then you cut it out, and then you add in a bunch of guys from, I don't want to say off the street and whatnot, but it does seem that things get a little bit goofy and whatnot as well, as far as when you add in the extra players and whatnot. You don't know what Jared Jones-Smith is going to do. You don't know what EJ Perry is going to do, which I was surprised EJ Perry. And not only that, Josh Peterson as well was not offered a contract as well. So we'll see what happens on that. But I do think it makes it very complicated. Just keep going through the comments as well before we start digging into the roster. What are your thoughts on teams not informing players after being selected?
Yeah, that's brutal. Especially in the Toby Johnson case where he made it a big deal that he didn't want to be picked. He wanted to leave the USFL side. He came around, but come on, just I'm sure you guys have their information. Just send them a text at least, saying, "Hey, we drafted you," but you had multiple days to decide that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
that seems like some classic spring football hijinks to me.
Yeah. Well, you also got, you also have one of the guys I talked to, he was on the Brahmas, and I texted him because I have a personal relationship with him, and I texted him, and I sent it to Reed yesterday on his show. I was like, "Hey man, congrats." He goes, "What are you talking about?" I go, "Oh, you were protected," because he was going into his rookie year. He was a fringe guy. To be honest with you, really, he could have made it, could have not, whatever. But he goes into his rookie year, and then, or it'd be his sophomore year because he played in the CFL last year, and he made it, and he was just kind of okay, that's first I'm hearing about it. But Thorne, let's go A to Z on this, man. Let's go break down these rosters a little bit, and let's start poking at some of these players and see what's up. Right now, I got the Renegades roster. Obviously, Holton Errors is there, and not a free agent or anything like that, but a rookie signing, for lack of a better term. What you think about my man HA?
First off, I'm a lefty. That's important. He's a lefty, so I have to like him.
Yeah.
He made some interesting comments on a radio show recently, kind of saying that he's coming to take Perez's job, which we'll get to Perez eventually. But it's tough with these guys. That I haven't watched a ton of college film, but he's one of those guys that I've been eyeing up throughout the regular season. As a guy who I really want to see get a shot in spring football. So I'm happy he's here, and obviously we'll get to it, but they have a few rookie quarterbacks on that roster right now.
Yeah, and you got Lindsey Scott there, you got Luis Perez there. There's a lot of, my opinion, little drama. You sign a guy like Connor Dagenhart, you sign Connor Blumrick, who is more of your Taysom Hill gadget type quarterback. You add in the loss, in my opinion, as well of Kevin Anderson, Kelly Bryant. So it just, to me, it gets so goofy with everything that John Hayes and John Hayes. You had John Hayes there. You had Chuck Long. Like they really wanted to do an upheaval of the offense, and that's cool and adorable and everything. So we'll see what happens there. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not losing my mind about it, but it's the Perez show. Like I've said, I think I've made it very known that multiple times he's thrown for over 5,000 career spring yards in addition to about, I don't know, let's say like almost 40 touchdowns in the spring. He's the spring king and will remain so until it is.
Also, in that quarterback room, since we're doing it, piecemeal. Yesterday, Drew Plitt wasn't protected, so is there space for him in this room? I don't know, but it's another name to watch. He's available now.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm glad you bring that up because my opinion on Plitt is I think he's kind of tapped out in, as far as like what he can do or what he can't do and whatnot. So with Plitt, I don't know if I see Drew Plitt being the guy by any means in Arlington or in the NFL, but I definitely could see him floating around the NFL on practice squads, especially late in the season when you want a guy who is in your system and whatnot. But on the flip side, Joe Burrow's injury doesn't seem too serious. I think Jake Browning is on a 1-year deal because he was originally on the practice squad and got elevated to the active roster. And you also have AJ McCarron, who's on the active roster, who had a 1-year deal as well. They technically go into the draft process with only one quarterback. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying that's gospel or anything like that, but like just by law of percentages, one of those guys is coming back just for continuity. Especially you bring back a guy like Plitt, he can play rookie ball, he can play OTAs and mini camp. You at least have a guy who knows what is going on in the offense. You don't want Burrow out there throwing extra reps. Plitt don't get many reps on the practice squad. His arm's fresh,
Yeah, I think they probably bring back Browning though. He's been too good as a backup, unless they get priced out of him.
Yeah, I mean, but this is a guy who was offered. This is a guy who was offered 140K, like the highest signing bonus as a rookie free agent. Excuse me. So you don't know, anything's possible. I definitely don't disagree. I would bring back Browning. If I'm AJ, I kind of just do what I want. I looked it up earlier. AJ made like 600K this year, plus whatever he made with the XFL. So, I mean, and he's made almost $20 million in the NFL. So, and his wife was a model. But, they keep going. We can talk about quarterbacks all day, and we probably will. First name that comes off the board for their pick, Vic Beasley, former All-Pro from their Super Bowl run with the Falcons. Didn't really wow me that much. A lot of retreads on that Vegas team. What's your take on him?
Yeah, right now the way I have it slotted, I think he's behind Tuzar Skipper and Willie Taylor, who they both protected.
Yeah.
I'm okay with him being kind of a rotational guy there. I think that's probably all he is, though. I was really surprised. I really thought through this process he was going to retire. Kind of one and done it like Josh Gordon. But, it's cool that he's still around. But, I don't have high expectations for what he's going to be in Arlington this year.
Yeah, and I think Vic Dog is 100% correct. He is old. I think, we were kind of awkwardly blessed by a lot of what ifs. And you can even bring this back to 2020 a little bit. Like you had Matt McGloin, Matt McGloin did have success in the NFL and never really got another opportunity. He got hurt in line for the playoff game, I believe, in 2016. That's when Connor Cook had to play. So you're like, oh, what if Matt McGloin got one more shot? He didn't do well. What if PJ Walker gets a shot? He did manage to extend his NFL career by 4 years and $6 million. What if Josh Johnson gets a shot? What if AJ McCarron gets a shot? Goes out, lights it up. Ben DiNucci. We had a lot of those what if guys, and And let's be honest, AJ goes out there, doesn't play well, he's done. Danucci goes out there, doesn't play well, he's done. You might be a late season signing, just because your buddy was the OC or a quarterbacks coach on the new team. But in the end, guys had the opportunity this year to put up or shut up, and some did, and I don't feel like Vic Beasley did, and that's fine. He's a way better defensive end than I will ever be. But like you said, good rotational piece. If anything, experience for younger guys there. And sometimes you just need guys there just to draw eyeballs on the league, and there's nothing wrong with that.
For sure.
Moving down, they also picked up USC receiver Deontay Burnett. Burnett was an all XFL guy. What's your take of this?
I like it. I think Burnett's a perfect 2. You could really feel that offense struggle when Kirkland got hurt and they kind of lost their main guy. But as for a 2 there, I really like him. It was interesting that they when they drafted him, because they didn't protect Brandon Arconato, who was a starting wide receiver for them last year.
Yeah, but they're wide receivers. None of them were the guy. Like,
they kind of rotated them through.
Yeah, Caleb Van Der Esch really came on, in my opinion. You had LaJuan Winningham, who might be the physically most gifted of them, and then Caleb Van Der Esch came on towards the end, and then you had Tyler Vaughn's kind of in there as well. But none of them really wowed me as like, this is the guy,
For sure. Arconato was the starter there, and you're right that they flipped it through. But it just feels like a 1-to-1 replacement for him, in a lot of ways, where it's like, okay, well, we're not protecting that guy, so we're going to bring in Burnett, who we think's a little better.
Gladiator Dog writes, the brother of Leighton Van Der Esch. I don't remember if they're brothers, but I know they're related. It got brought up multiple times. Van Der Esch, he went to camp. He was actually with the Battlehawks. The fun thing about St. Louis is you had so many of these St. Louis guys that ended up, going either to the NFL or having big roles that were cut by St. Louis, like Van Der Esch, Letty Brown, Jordan Thomas. Name escapes me. One more. Jalen Smith. Yeah. And then, Jordan Thomas obviously went to the NFL for a little bit. He was on the Panthers practice squad as a linebacker. But, stretch the field a little bit. Deontay Burnett, do your thing. Another guy I'm intrigued to, Devin Darrington. I think Orlando had a very underrated running back situation. Jermaine Martin was pretty good. Overall, running back by committee. I wish they used Quentin Flowers in that little artsy-fartsy role a little bit, but in the end, Devin Darrington, definitely a good second fiddle. Their running back situation, to me, got better, and I know that's a very, vague term and whatnot, but I do feel like they definitely improved and whatnot, so we'll see what happens on that front. But, yeah, I'm definitely, they go in with, Davion Smith, Letty Brown, Darrington, Morgan Ellison, who also got picked up, and then Day Hunter. Don't really know much about Day, maybe a camp body, but I feel good about those 4 guys in my running back room.
Yeah, I predicted the Devin Darrington. I did an article last week. I did it's actually 2. I split them, XFL and USFL, on team needs and potential additions. And kind of my argument with why they should get Darrington specifically was they need juice in their backfield. They got a lot of plotting guys who, are like, 3 yards in a cloud of dust guys like Devion Smith, Letty Brown. They didn't really have much that had some upside to if they broke it, they could get away from a DB. And I think Darrington has that ability. Ellison also, he's an interesting one because he kind of got in the doghouse a few weeks in. He was looking like he was going to be one of the better running backs in the XFL, but then, second half of the year, barely played. So, I don't have overwhelmingly high expectations from him, but he's also there. It'll be interesting to see if he can kind of recapture that first half of the season, play.
Yeah, and they also take a little bit of, I don't want to say a flyer, but they also take a little bit of a project piece in Adrian Ely. Ely's bounced around practice squads for years, coming out of Oklahoma for 2021. You got to think that's a Stoops connection a little bit. He had Ely at one point, may have recruited him at one point. I'm not sure, but Bob Stoops to Oklahoma. Never a crazy ask, especially when Stoops came back in 2021 to coach their bowl game. So I'm very curious on that. Bro, it's football ass. Is Jontre Kirkland going to be back? I think the Saints released him. The Saints did release him. I mean, we'll see. San Antonio, anytime you got a Houston guy at this point, put your mind to San Antonio. Let him, cook with AJ Smith. I don't know if Peyton Pardee comes back. He's at AFCA right now, which I was supposed to be at, but things happen. And I would have asked him straight up if I saw him, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Kirkland. Overall, moving through this, they pick up also Seth Green, Ajay Harris led the XFL in interceptions. What do you know about Seth Green? I don't know much about him.
Yeah, that's another curious one. I kind of looked him up a little bit. Saw he's been on a bunch of practice squads. They have him listed at wide receiver, but he plays tight end and he's like 240 pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe he's slimmed out, but I kind of think he's a tight end. And it would make sense because they didn't protect any tight ends. So, first off, it's important to mention Sal Cannella was not part of this process. He signed to the NFL and then got cut. So he wasn't able to be protected. He has to re-sign. And I think he's one of these veterans that are just going to wait out this process and see where the chips fall.
Yeah.
But our other two tight ends, Nate Becker, Sean Byer, they didn't protect either of them. So right now, Seth Green's kind of the only tight end on the roster. It wouldn't shock me if they just bring those two guys back in the dispersal draft. But that's probably the most interesting thing is just right now he's their only tight end.
Yeah, and you also add in they had Tyler Roberts, who was with the Chiefs, I think, for minicamp, in addition to Kerry. I can't say his last name. I apologize for that. Kerry Angerin, who also was a part of their was a part of the Stallions in 2022, who got cut in camp and then was brought back. So we'll see what happens on that. Just want to give a quick shout out to Delonte Hood coming from Peru State. Peru State is a team I played. Long story short, NAIA school, always got to show the love to NAIA. Really always think it's an awesome story when those guys kind of transition. Jake Lucina from, I believe, D2 Augustana. Guy we always want to shout out as well. He was with the Generals for 2 years, all USFL center.
Yeah.
Tomasi Lawali, he also played in the NFL for a little bit, USFL guy. I believe he was with the Gamblers last year, scored a touchdown, had a pick six against Luis Perez. I always like to note that Luis Perez threw 5 touchdowns in the first game, two to the Renegades and 3 to his guys. Always a fun stat. And then they kind of go back and forth between offense, defense. Heavy offensive draft for them, but Marcus Minor, another LOI guy on a couple practice squads, and Christian Morgan. What do you think about those two guys?
I think Minor was a draft pick by the Roughnecks, but I think both of them, if I'm not mistaken, were off-season additions, so I don't know a ton about them. But I will say one thing to point out with Morgan and Jeannie Harris is the Renegades did not protect their entire starting secondary. So Joe Powell, Will Hill, Devontae Bosby, Josh Hawkins, and Shakur Brown, the kind of 5 DBs that were their starters when they're fully healthy, none of them got protected. So they're starting over in the secondary. So those guys might end up getting some, legit playing time. There's some opportunity there, assuming they don't bring them right back in the dispersal draft or the super draft as they're calling it now.
Yeah, and we saw that as well with the Battlehawks did that as well. They also pretty much started over in the secondary. Roger Perry's another guy they brought in. Roger Perry's another guy they brought in that was a fringe NFL guy who's going to be in the interior. Very curious on that. I don't believe Doug Costin came back. I'll just double
No.
check that. So that seems like a replacement there.
Yeah, well, he was a guy who signed in the NFL and never signed back, so he's a free agent right now.
Well, I also think Costin might be done. He's had a couple NFL stints. And I say the same thing to Canella because Canella's got his clothing brand and everything like that. So maybe a lot of these guys kind of stick to their their brands, and that's the argument I think I made about DiNucci. That if I'm DiNucci, do I want to be just a guy in the NFL, or would I rather use the XFL's platform to have my player 54, keep advertising my brand, and I'm only making $70,000 from the XFL, but I'm also making a lot of money because I'm like on ESPN once a week and people are seeing my brand and everything like that. So that's something I'm curious about. I don't know if I'm in the right, by saying that, but that's just something that I am uber curious about and curious to see other people's opinions on. Is it better for DiNucci to make $250,000 in the NFL, or is it better for him to be the star of the XFL where every week people are seeing true brand everywhere? So, going down, LaRon Stokes and Lindsey Scott. Lindsey Scott obviously has bounced around. He was the number 2 pick in the USFL college draft, number 2 or number 3 to the Maulers, comes through to the Renegades. I mean, he's highly sought after. Everyone wants a little bit of Lindsey Scott. So definitely see him competing. I think Perez goes in as QB1, but he's got a short leash with Lindsey Scott there as well. I don't see Holton Errors being the guy, for lack of a better term. LaRon Stokes, another Oklahoma guy, fringe NFL guy. What do you think about him?
That one was interesting to me because he didn't particularly stand out to me last year, and maybe that's just because he's an interior defensive lineman. He doesn't get the love, but I would have never predicted him being a first-round pick. They must – I mean, obviously they didn't protect 2 of their starters in TJ Barnes and Josiah Coatney, so maybe this was part of that was kind of retooling that defensive line, but certainly one that kind of made me raise my eyebrow just because I wasn't expecting him to go that high.
Yeah, and once again, he is a Oklahoma guy, so you always got to respect the connection to Stoops. Before we go into the next team's roster, dang MQ, appreciate the comment. This is the type of stuff I like talking about. So yesterday, James Larson appeared on the UFL podcast and said he saw a tweet. About De'Aaron King that he was trolling. I saw some text messages between a couple player personnel people and, saying that we haven't even talked to De'Aaron. We don't know what he's talking about. I'm in step at saying that, King was joking around. I believe he was joking around, but it was definitely one of those, like, are you serious and whatnot? I'm a part-time coach. So, and I put a lot of effort in and a lot of work in. I can only imagine playing, and at a major, group of 5 team at the Division I FBS level. I don't see how you could go into spring ball without your full-time starting or QB coach. I think he was kind of just testing the waters personally, but what do I know? So that's my opinion. I think it could go either way, but I don't see King coming back. Enjoy the coaching life. Go make a bunch of money, man.
Yeah, I think he's done.
Yeah, I think he was testing the waters, but I don't see him coming back. Going on to the Stallions, obviously, thing that pops off the board immediately, Chris Blewett, NFL caliber kicker, fringe NFL guy, replacing Brendan Aubrey. Marcus Baugh, former Ohio State tight end, played the last 2 years with the Panthers, played in the AAF. I don't think he played in the XFL 2020. I think he was with Washington at that point. And Calvin Ashley has been a staple in the USFL for the last 2 years, all USFL selection. Pretty solid way to start it off. I mean, when you have Zach Potter, um, when you have Zach Potter as your GM, it kind of seems like you're going to be in a good position no matter what. Obviously, keeping a, a stable of NFL guys who sign contracts. TJ Carter recently signing an NFL contract. Neville Clark. Like, this is as close to an NFL roster as you can get, in my opinion.
Yeah, their edge group is ridiculous because right now they got Carlo Kemp, who they signed in free agency, DeAndre Tillman, who they're bringing back, Henry St. Amour and Hercules Mataafa, who they drafted, and then Curtis Weaver as like probably your fifth edge rusher. Like, that's insane. DeMarcus Mitchell, Jalen Twinman. These are guys who have either recently been in the NFL or guys who have been balling out at this level. And it's just a murderer's row of edge rushers that they have right now. I don't see how they aren't going to, lead this new league in sacks because they have the guys.
Yeah. And it just seems like they're going to constantly be fresh. They're going to constantly have a good rotation. They're going to be putting a lot of, bodies out there who are all going to be playing and whatnot. And I know that's a real rudimentary thing to say, but in reality, that's kind of how it is. Like, for them, I don't see those guys getting tired. I don't see those guys, missing assignments due to depth. I'm really pumped about like this next step for them. And, I might hurt some feelings here. I do feel like a lot of the talent, leaned more towards the XFL. So a lot of people, but I mean, these guys have done a great job, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if there was a disparity between the 3 USFL teams and the 1 XFL team, or and the Stallions, where all the other USFL teams go like 4-6, and then the Stallions go like 8-2, and and win the championship, just because I feel like they're just so have versus have nots, and they only got better through this draft.
Yeah, I think the argument I would make to push back on that is if you think that the USFL talent as a whole was a little bit weaker, then the condensing of the teams really can make them catch up on lost ground. And you see this as we get to some of the other teams, but teams that were kind of just okay before feel like they're ridiculously stacked now on the USFL side because they have, suddenly they have depth where they really didn't beforehand.
Yeah, I felt the XFL competition was more tightly knit. I felt the USFL competition was more have and have not.
Yeah.
Because even like I felt like the Stars were one of the best teams, except they didn't have any offensive line depth because they lost guys to the NFL. Drew Himmelman, who got selected on this list, is one of the best offensive linemen in the USFL. He came on late. He got hurt. And you saw when Himmelman went to the Stars, you saw how much better they got, one. And then two, you saw how much better Cookus was. And then when he was gone again, you saw, because they signed like a Division III guy, and then they signed another guy who was pretty much off the street for that play in game. So we'll see what happens on that. Another guy I want to shout out, Cam Carter from Murray State was a starter for the Generals last year. You're adding some quality depth. I think they stay pretty pat with their offensive line, but if Calvin Ashley could definitely creep in there, no problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think some of the additions this offseason kind of on that offensive line kind of made it a little less necessary because they went out, they got Christian Delario, Alex Taylor, Zach Johnson. These guys have been like we're in the NFL like this year. So they're getting guys who are like fresh out of, NFL circles. And I think that because of that, like they just didn't feel like they had to like go heavy on offensive line, and they didn't have to go heavy on picks either. They did not take many. They only have 53 players on their roster right now. Yeah. They're saving spots at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly where my headspace lies, but I value the Stallions as the team to beat, despite my comments about like the talent disparity, because they overall, to me, have the best potential to continue this run going. And they bring a lot of guys back, man. And that's the thing is like you keep bringing these guys back, you get continuity. There's the coaching staff looks the same. Chavis is still there. It just seems to me like continuity in these leagues, in my opinion, is such a big deal because now we're not starting from day one install. Now we're already at day 4 install. So they're a little bit ahead. They can get a little bit more cute. They also pick up a guy, Dan Isom, St. Louis local, went to Washington State, practice squad guy with the Rams. Really pumped about that. He could supplement the secondary since they lost, Matt Hankins, who was a depth player there, who's now with the Chargers, and I believe was given a futures deal. I mean, their secondary, they kind of rebranded a little bit as well. They got rid of Nate Brooks. I don't think Brian Allen is still on the team.
No, they didn't protect either of those guys.
Yeah, so
Christian McFarland, they also didn't protect.
Yeah, that was another guy I was a little surprised about. He's been there for 2 years. So, and that's the thing too, man. You see these guys there for 2 years, and then you're good. You're like, hey, we've seen enough. We're good. So,
Also, they're another team that I think they might be trying to sneak a few guys through to the Super Draft. Where they probably looked at it and said, we have maybe 46 guys that we really like on this roster right now. And, I'm not saying everyone that they didn't protect is going to come back, but I think a few guys, like a Bo Scaribo, I think that you could sneak him through. I don't think anyone's going to be jumping on him.
No, especially coming off injury.
Yeah, and age and all that. I think some of those kind of guys and those secondary guys, Willie Henry's another one.
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to play some games to try to get them back.
And that's what I said about specialists as well. There is a a smorgasbord of specialists. So when you see your team not pick up a long snapper or not pick up a kicker or a punter, they, in my opinion, you keep that kind of moving forward. And the Battlehawks did not, keep a kicker. I feel like there's that under the line conversation of, hey, you're coming back. If you get picked up by an NFL, another team, great. We still want you in this league, but we want you. And at this point, with the leagues, getting cut in half, you can't. You got to be happy to have, just a job opportunity. So I'm sure a guy like Donnie Hagman, while he would love to be in St. Louis and kick for the Battlehawks, he'll be okay with just having an opportunity. And there's long snappers as well, pushing down their list. Talked about Chris Orr, Henry St. Amour, really like him as well. He was a part of that 2022 team that had Sharif Miller and Davin Bellamy, 2 studs. Channing Stribling, I was on the fence about him. Does he sneak through? Does he not sneak through? Do we see him kind of cross over to the Battlehawks who drafted him last year? But if Zach Potter wants you, Zach Potter gets you, and he gets the 2022 All USFL corner. So, Stribling's a kind of a go big, go home type of guy, and we'll see what happens with that. What do you think of James Wiggins? I know Eli Walker coming from the Maulers a little bit, but what do you think of this Wiggins guy? I don't know much about him.
I liked him. I think he was a 5th round pick in the NFL. He was certainly a draft pick. I forget exactly which team. He was a midseason addition to the Breakers last year. He ended up, I think he either got a lot of reps or was a starter. I'm not exactly sure which off the top of my head. But he's a guy, I kind of thought he went to the CFL. And signed with the CFL team. So I'm not sure if he's going to be a guy who ends up playing in the UFL or not. But if he does play, I think Kenny Robinson's going to be their free safety.
Yeah.
And Eli Walker Wiggins probably is going to end up being their strong.
Yeah. Chris Mason asks, where's Ginda? Ginda is technically on the Falcons right now. He hasn't been offered a futures deal. But things can change. He was there for about 7 weeks, I think Ginda was. So we'll see what happens with him. And I think Gladiator Dog is spot on. Go big or go home with Channing Stribling. we'll see what happens on that front. So, that covers the Birmingham roster. Going down to DC, Deontay Anderson, big guy to keep tabs on. Elijah Blades, another defensive back, and then biggest thing with biggest thing with the defenders is obviously, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, they pick up DeAndre Francois as their only quarterback on their roster.
Yeah, that's a curious one. I think that has to signal that Teamu's probably coming back. We talked about King. I don't think he's going to be back around. But, if it's not him, maybe a Kellen Mond just came available. The Colts didn't offer him a futures deal. But, I just can't imagine, especially in a condensed league, that DeAndre Francois can be more than a QB3 guy. I just would be shocked if he's anything more than that. Maybe you could see him in the De'Ara King role at a best case scenario where he's the one who's doing kind of the running and more of a running quarterback, like not like in a Lamar Jackson kind of way, but like an actual guy who's just there to facilitate the run game. But yeah, I really thought they were going to go out, and especially because there's so many mobile guys, and we'll get to who's available, but like Steven Montez, Jalen McClendon, I thought there was better options available there.
Yeah, I definitely was very surprised not to see Montez, strictly for the fact that no, DeAndre Francois is the FSU guy. You're thinking of Felipe Franks, who's technically still on the roster, Gladiator Dog. Francois, to me, a lot of people forget he played in the spring league as well, and another outdoor Brian Woods adventure, and wasn't, barely beating out Ben Holmes for a job down there and whatnot. And I'm not really too high on Francois, from the rumors of him being the one to say that stuff about Dormandy and whatnot. So I'm not really high on him. I'd like to see them bring in other guys. Montez, pretty mobile, big physical guy. They tried to kind of work him in early in the season into that role. I would have loved to see them use Montez on a little bit more tush pushes for the Sea Dragons, but Danucci was airing that bad boy out so much that no one really cared. Dormandy, Jalen McClendon. McClendon needs more experience. He's still learning and whatnot, but I can't say anything bad about him, especially seeing him play. Big pickup here, Deontay Anderson, all XFL guy. I think he had over 50 tackles last year. Physical guy. I'm pretty excited to see him. Elijah Blades, a little bit raw. See what's going on with him. JUCO guy, LOI guy, and then Jean Delance from Florida, another guy who's also an LOI guy who had cups of tea. So those are their first couple signings, and then Jordan Evans, obviously from Seattle, stud linebacker, physical. Very curious to see what he's got going on. Oklahoma guy as well. So I think they did a pretty good job of kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Continuing to build and whatnot as well. Thorne got kicked out. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, it just broke out. Anyway.
Yeah. Gladiator Dog brings up a fan favorite over here. What do you think of, DeAndre Johnson or Keel Glass? I would rather Johnson. I just think Glass needs a little bit more seasoning. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he's going to get that. He's going to get that now.
Yeah, it's important to mention that Francois. He's a free agent, so it's not going to be through this process. I could see him getting picked up after the fact, but he's a guy that I don't want to be the guy in DC. I think he's really. I mean, he hasn't had the best opportunities in New Jersey this year, but he was getting benched for Colorado. I'm not so high on him. But,
yeah, and Chris Mason adds, I want Cookus with the Panthers on that O-line. He would have been fine. I agree with that. I don't think that's an outlandish take whatsoever. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. Things could happen. Things could happen. They have four quarterbacks in Memphis, so maybe there's a trade or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. Moving down the list, they pick up also Trent Harris as well, linebacker. I believe he was an all XFL guy. And then Donovan Jeter. I think he was an LOI guy as well.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. But, I mean, Harris, George Moore. Was George Moore with the USFL at one point? I'm trying to remember.
He was Arlington Renegade last year. And then
Okay.
in the offseason got traded to Seattle.
Okay.
So that's where you know him from.
Yeah, you shore up some offensive line depth. And then you got Adam Sparks, physical defensive back and whatnot. And then Takarius Tisdale. I don't know much about him if you want to fill us in on him.
I do actually have something to say about Tisdale because I'm pretty sure, started in DC last year and then got cut at some point or through IR, like swap teams. So he goes to Seattle, finishes the season in Seattle. So it feels like kind of like, okay, well, we liked this guy before. We're going to bring him back in this process. But he was in DC beforehand.
Yeah, and you also, something to not forget as well with all this is that you will have guys, get cut and whatnot. A lot of roster shuffling. They still have to add the 75. So just because you're on this roster doesn't mean you're on the opening day roster as well. So it is. It could get real goofy, but in the end, they finish out with another strong Houston Roughneck, Tim Ward, who was one of the 3 Roughnecks who had over 5 sacks in Wade Phillips' offense or defense last year. So defensive heavy, some offensive line help. I mean, you would think they'd go a little harder with the receiving core because they lost Lucky Jackson and Chris Blair, but it is what it is. Von Hutchins is the DPP down there. He knows what he's doing. So, and you got pretty good coordinators in Fred Keiss and Greg Williams at the helm. Moving down to the Houston Roughneck Gamblers. What are we thinking here? Obviously, all USFL guy Paul Adams, Isaiah Battle from Clemson. Definitely not a scrub there. They go tight end heavy. I'm a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of tight ends and there was a lot of offensive linemen. They had, I think, what is that? They have 6 guys on offensive line coming into this that they protected. Only 4 of them were on the team last year, so they kind of refreshed there, and they needed an influx of talent there, and I think they did a good job. Jack Kramer, Paul Adams, Shamarius Gilmore. That's as good of a interior as you're gonna get in the spring league, in my opinion. And then they add, Isaiah Battle, Marcus Tatum to the tackle group. They brought back both their tackles, so I think that that alone puts them in the top tier of drafts because they just, I think they just changed their outlook with that, so many good offensive linemen. Tight end's interesting because I'm not like super high on any of the guys they took, but I think as a group they'll be good. It's almost like DC last year where they didn't have any one guy that was like otherworldly, but they just had 3 or 4 pretty good guys. And I think that Houston kind of will have a similar circumstance where right now they have like 4 guys that I think could be decent, but are, I think collectively they'll make a pretty good tight end group.
Yeah, and then you have also, returning Rondell Raheem, Clint Sig. My thing with Bradham and Bowman is, and it's a little bit of a tongue twister, is that those guys are going to be more your physical blocking guys. Sig's pretty athletic. He plays the H-back a little bit. But, Vogel said it the other day, expect these guys to be in 12 personnel, 13 personnel a lot, and really just be physical, especially when you have Mark Thompson there, who's writing a lot of checks, man. He's writing a lot of checks with his mouth, so let's see what happens on that front. You bring up Gilmore, guy was getting some NFL workouts during the offseason. or during in season and whatnot. Reuben Foster really kind of reinvented his career this year. I think this is the final go for him. If he doesn't pick into the NFL, he'll move on with his life, and not that there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. But very, very excited to see him give it like a full off season of being locked in, NFL workouts, all that goofy stuff, and then Cyril Grayson from Philly as well, along with Isaiah Henney, really get shifty on the receiving game. Grayson could play the outside a little bit, couple him in there, so really pumped about that. And then they also picked up Ryan Izzo, another tight end who they might try to get the ball to, but that's going to be a guy who I think can compete for that H-back type position. So we'll see what happens on that front.
Yeah, I think the Henny pick was really interesting to me because Justin Hall's a very similar player in, kind of that shifty, wide, smaller wide receiver type. They also have Isaiah Zuber, who's kind of similar too, although he might be full on switching the corner now.
Yeah, he plays on both sides of the ball, so I'm very curious to see what his status is.
For sure, but I definitely think that's kind of what they're going for, is kind of a big shot, run the ball all the time, kind of similar to like the DC Defenders in 2020, where like they had Cardell Jones when before he started throwing picks every play, where their idea was, okay, we're going to run the ball with Jarrell Presley and they had another guy, can't think of off the top of my head, and then we would take the big shots with our quarterback, and I think Jared Garantano probably fits that bill the best of the two they have right now.
Yeah. Also, adding some meat in there with Reggie Howard and Toby Johnson. We talked about them earlier. Very curious to see, how bought in Toby is. He's an older guy, so maybe he might also be on his swan song as well. But overall, like all these teams, I obviously feel they got better. Adam Rodriguez, all USFL guy. Let's see what happens with him. Olive Segapolo, Keontae Shea, Gabriel Sewell. This defense to me just got that much better, and they've been a physical group. Like, you're bringing in Ethan Westbrooks, he might be your third string, 3 technique or 3-4 end.
Right now, I don't have him making the roster because they brought all their defensive linemen last year they had a decent defensive line, and then they added 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah, and I believe Reggie Walker is still there, who I think is really underrated. So we'll see what happens on that front. Overall, I don't know if I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth right with this, but I do feel like they got so much better. And I believe it's Keontae Gladiator Dog. I just feel like they got so much better. I'm really excited because they were a fringe playoff team last year. Let's see how they do this year. But overall, I think the Gamblers or the Gamble Necks are so shade would be my opinion. I think the Gamblers are going to be so polarized because of them being cut or them cutting the Roughnecks and whatnot, that you are going to have like a little bit of extra eyes on this team. Like, hey, you guys better step up, because if you don't, type thing. So that's my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely have one of the better drafts for sure. Adding, they also added Chris Odom before this process, so him and Rodriguez as an edge group is pretty nice on top of their previous guys who they had last.
No, it's definitely going to be a fun team. And Gladiator Dog, I do love butchering names. I find that to be uber respectful to the players. Chris Mason has asked about Danny Etling a decent amount. I find Etling to be a more mobile version, a more athletic version of EJ Perry, in addition to maybe having the similar, if not better, arm strength. I think it was a very good 1-for-1 swap that they picked up. They picked up Etling, but time will tell. He's been around a lot of NFL rosters, has a Super Bowl ring, has been around a lot of great quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and has been around some decent backups like Brian Hoyer, who could teach a guy how to prepare and whatnot. So Etling could pop. Etling could really, really pop. Moving down to the Showboats, another team that really just kind of focused in hard on the Breakers. Surprise, surprise there. Starting off with John Adams, D. Anderson, and the wide receiver group. In addition, they brought back Sage Surratt as well. Real pumped about what they got going on. Anything that pops out for you with the Showboats outside of them being very heavy on the Breaker side?
Yeah, I think you have to. They're the winners of these drafts just because, like, if you come out of a draft with a top quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, it's tough to say otherwise. I mean, Case Cookus, to me, was the best quarterback available by a wide margin. Darius Victor's he's been really good for the Generals. I think he can be, your bell cow. Jonathan Adams is a great addition to that receiving core, where I feel like they had Ryan McDaniel, who kind of fits a similar bill, but they didn't really have like a guy who was like the true X that could constantly dominate like Jonathan Adams does. And then Sage Surratt, it was, one of, if not the best tight ends in the USFL last year. So adding all those guys in one draft on top of, Vontae Diggs, DJ Daniel, there's a lot of really good players here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like they had a bad roster before this. They had an okay one. And so, Cole Kelly, I like him. I liked him as a starter last year. He's clearly your backup now. And you're happy about that if you're a Showboats fan or a coach there. And in general, that's just kind of how I look at it all the way down, is like they just got so much deeper as a team.
Yeah. Well, you add in some defensive line depth and Connor Christian, Vontae Diggs, obviously an all USFL caliber player. But this whole thing is going to rely on Cookus, and something that, you do have now Cole Kelly as your backup is now you can get a little bit cute with him in his 6'7" frame, and let him kind of, stretch his legs out a little bit with some RPOs and, just straight up QB runs and QB power and whatnot. So very curious to see how Kelly kind of fits into this. I do feel that at times he was playing some top 4 USFL QB football. I do feel at times he was probably number 6 or 7, depending on what Kenji Bahar did and whatnot. So I am very excited to see these guys kind of, maximize their skill set and whatnot. Jerry Elder, it's so Breakers heavy that you take that 7-3 team, put it together with Case Cookus, and then the existing pieces that they have. I don't see this being a bad time at all for them. PJ Hall was a signing. He was playing with the Sea Dragons last year, a little bit NFL experience. Jordan Ferguson came on late with them. I mean, this team could surprise you. All these teams just got so much better that it's hard. It's really hard for me to be like, oh, this is the team. This is not the team. You got Vinny Papali as your cute little shifty slot back and whatnot as well, or not slot back, slot receiver, all USFL. Jaron Jones, Kirk Kelly played at a really high level. Colin Hill was picked up. John Atkins, another year. Once again, could be a swan song for him. He's a little bit older, but there's just so many assets there that you can't. And now that you have one of the better QBs in the league, let's go. Let's see what happens. Very surprised Jordan McRae came back, was protected. He's 32 years old, been on a lot of leagues, a lot of football teams, but they obviously liked him enough to bring him back as well.
Yeah, he's right now, to me, their only center. So seems like his job to lose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you also bring back from the 2022 Bandits, uh, Darren Paulo, who spent the who spent, I believe, that last season with the Lions on their practice squad the whole year. And then Terry Poole, who's been one of the consistent figures of spring football, really came on, end of the year. He wasn't graded that high from PFF, but if you actually watch the tape, you could see him getting better and allowing a lot of stability for Troy Williams, who's another guy that didn't get picked up as well. Picking up another tight end is Wes Saxton, 2015 draft pick, been around a couple teams and whatnot from New Jersey. I think he's going into like his 10th year in spring ball. So a veteran pick there. Greg Reeves, another guy, the Grim Reaver. That's a guy that I feel, could really have another solid season, play at an all USFL level. They bring back Nehemiah Shelton. That guy was on the Jets for a little bit. He was a draft pick of theirs. Very, very, very pumped about that. And I think, Gladiator Dog, completely right. Reeves and McCullough, there is a wealth of riches here, just like every team. And I hate saying that because it's such like a low brain power take. But at what point, like, you're going to repeat yourself when you just cut down the best players everywhere. Interesting. They did keep 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah. And I'll also say Gladiator Dog, I see the comment right below me. Burrell was not protected, so he's not on the roster right now.
Yeah.
So he's not in the picture for the moment.
Yeah. I mean, when I said that comment earlier about being 4 and 6, I don't mean it as like a disrespect. I just mean about how much talent is in this league right now. So,
sure.
Yeah. But he wants to say who's better. Who do you think is better, Burrell or McCray? I have to lean with younger players, man. Especially McCray got hurt last year as well.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, but
Burrell was out for most of the year, so I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe he just says, I'm good. I'm good. Final pickup for them, we talked about Vito, over 1,000 yards, offensive player of the year in 2022. You kind of couple that with their, Kareth White, who popped at times, running back by committee, save some of the tread on Vito's tires. I could see that run game being pretty good, but let's spread that ball out. Let's throw it 35 times a game and let's score touchdowns,
Yeah.
So moving to the Michigan Panthers, wanted to highlight Jacob Burden. He was a late signing there. Really curious on, if he's able to kind of push into the starting offensive line. I don't believe they picked up Keith Williams, who's been with the team for the last 3 years. Very curious on that. And he was re-signed. But I definitely see some of these offensive linemen they picked up, kind of stepping in and, making an impact, and two, just making their presence known. Obviously, they pick up Davis Cheek. That's going to be battling for their backup job with Brian Lewerke, Matthew Colburn. No Reggie Corbin.
Yeah, I think starting off at the offensive line, you mentioned Keith Williams not being there. Right now, they have 7 tackles.
Yeah,
and all of them are new. 2 draft picks, 4 guys from the Stars, which they took 9 offensive players from the Stars, which is weird.
Is it though? I don't think that's weird because I feel like that's who they were with the whole time.
Yeah, it's just weird that it was one team, like everyone else is like, oh, I'll take a few plays here if you guys there. But they took 4 tackles from them and they took 4 wide receivers and then Colburn on top of them. And I'm not too surprised with letting Corbin go. Obviously Wes Hills and Matt Colburn are known quantities in this space, but I really like Nate McCrary. I think, I'm a Ravens fan, and he was with us in 2021. And he had that was his rookie year. He was an undrafted guy, and he was really good in the preseason. So good that the Broncos didn't even let us put him on our practice squad. He got picked up by them. But I really would like to see what he can do in spring football. I think he could be someone who, no one's talking about right now, but he might be the best back in that backfield.
Yeah. I definitely agree that they did upgrade. I think that Corbin was kind of a one-trick pony. I didn't like him in pass blocking whatsoever. If you notice, they kind of used in those passing sets a lot of AJ Richardson, who played that hybrid role. I think losing Jordan Scarlett from 22 to 23, who was their gritty like pass catcher, punt protector, passing down blocker. Like I think that really kind of affected them a lot. Stevie Scott is with the Brahmas now. After he signed with the Cardinals like 3 times, he went to San Antonio. A couple, but you got Colburn, you got Wes Hills, who a fresher Wes Hills because he played like 7 games in Canada in 22 and then rolled straight into the USFL season. So very curious on that. Corey Coleman going to stretch that field. Gerard Fernandez, all USFL caliber guy. Keith Gibson, another Division III guy from the Maulers. Anytime you get any of these guys from the Maulers, man, I'm pretty high up on them. Devin Gray, another guy, freaking, cups of teas in the NFL. Real pumped that he still got an opportunity. I think he's got almost 1,000 receiving yards through the 2 seasons, including his time in the spring league. So, these stats don't matter to everyone, but to me, they kind of do because I always, it shows continuity of these guys being relevant. We talked about Wes Hills, was the guy last year and I think he just got tired. Drew Himmelman, talked about him earlier, really high on him. Jarrett Horse, physical tackle. It's going to be difficult to get all these guys on the field, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely felt like coming into this that their receiving core was lacking. They lost like everybody. They have 2 guys in the NFL right now, in DJ Montgomery and Caden Davis. Joe Walker is still available somehow, which we'll get to when we talk about who's still left. But Trey Quinn also went to the NFL. He's a free agent right now. So they really needed to refresh this room. It's interesting that they decided that the Stars room was great and that they're just going to, transplant that because, getting Coleman, Gray, and Sewell as kind of your starting 3 wide receivers. Obviously, I'll take it. Like that's a really good receiving core, but I thought that was definitely interesting. And then defensively, Gerard Fernandez as your Frank Ginda replacement, although maybe they'll get him back, is really good. And I really was happy to see. I thought that corner was a spot that I was kind of lacking depth. So getting Adonis Alexander, Keith Gibson, Alex Thomas, getting some guys who are versatile there, I think is really huge.
Yeah, I think corner is still a little bit of a concern. I really like their front 7, especially you bring back Jamal Meelan and Breland Speaks as well and whatnot. Nasir Player coming back. I think all those guys completely very competent players. You also add in them bringing in the safeties with Corey Rodman, who I think might get cut now based off just law of attrition, who was a real nice player for them in 2022. But you got Sholom Luani coming in there, could definitely push him out. All USFL guy, real physical guy. Garrett Marino, I think he could be on the fritz as well. Serviceable rotational guy, a little bit of an edge. Sometimes you need that. But, it just, once again, I'm talking in circles here, complete upgrade, really filled the pieces what they need from last year. They did a pretty okay job at picking up receivers in the offseason, but now they just kind of went above and beyond. And, a guy to keep eyes on, do you go in the 12 personnel, Gunnar Oaks and Cole Hicatini? it doesn't get much better than that. Also, very excited to see what Chim Okafor does, NAIA guy with cups of tea in the NFL. Very curious to see how he translates it with the first time actually getting on the field.
Yeah, for sure. They were able to kind of go out and get those two, Jared Horst also from their draft last year. They're able to go out and get some guys.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the one guy they haven't signed that's available is Tanner Morgan, the quarterback. So we'll see if that comes into fruition. They got Perry. They got a lot of potential guys that could add to that room. But yeah. Overall, I think Panthers coming out pretty good.
Yeah, and it's the safety as well from the Steelers. Was Bryce Torrendon? Was he a all USFL guy? I feel like he was pretty highly ranked on PFF.
I think year one he was. I think
yeah. I mean, once again, like we talked about Corey Rahman, like this guy's on the outside looking in now because you got Bryce and then Shalom Luani, not a bad spot, and takes a lot of pressure off off Levante Taylor and whoever's your QB or your cornerback too. Kai Nakua kind of playing that apex role, gonna come up in the box, gonna drop back into coverage. We called him a rover when I was in high school, and we call him an apex in college. So real pumped about that. Kenny Willicks as well, defensive end, edge rusher. Let's see, Michigan State guy. They love these dudes. Daniel Wise. One of my offensive coordinator coached him at KU. So nothing but good things to say about that guy. Deshaun White, full season now. They got rid of Patty Fisher. I was one of my more disappointing signings. Didn't really see him make much of an impact as well. So, and they also had someone I'm curious about is Santrell Latham, if he's kind of on the mid-season signing and whatnot, guy who's familiar with the system, sees what's going on. And there's always friend of the show, Terry Myrick, who played 2 years with them. That a lot of these guys, they might jump, in my opinion, better players because they know these systems quicker and they can plug and play. And that's something that always, in my opinion, doesn't get talked about enough.
For sure.
So overall, Michigan, good job. Let's see what Warren Saba does as well. I think Devin Ross is cut, by the way. I don't think he makes the cut.
Yeah,
personally.
If he can get back to 2022, Devin Ross, then maybe he has a chance, but we'll see.
Yeah, Lance Lenore still out there as well. Going to San Antonio. The San Antonio Roughnecks. Let's start it off hot, man. Bryson Aline, shifty guy, fan control football guy. Glad he's there. HBCU guy. Hartsdale, another NAIA guy. Really pumped about that. Chris Mason writes Terry Myrock. Yeah, I have a lot of love for Terry. I've met his dad a couple times, or I've met his dad. He was my first in-person interview I ever did when I was down in Georgia. So, and then, obviously, as expected, San Antonio stays very heavy with the Houston draft picks. That quarterback room, real disappointed. TJ Edwards, a GLVC D2 guy, did not stick around in favor of McKay, and they go Benkert and Jack Cohn. So, not what I would have did, but, I'm just a guy on YouTube, so who am I?
I'm just happy they didn't take Silvers in the draft. I thought that was a certainty, but maybe in the super draft. But I'm scared that it's gonna, we're gonna see all these young prospects, and then it's Silvers again for the 18th time.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I was surprised they didn't take Landon Akers. Like Akers. They traded. He was with San Antonio. Then they trade for him in the offseason. Guy really, despite injuries, became the guy in San Antonio with, kind of battling. Was it Javon Collier or Jalen Collier there?
I think so.
Yeah. So Akers still on the market. I definitely see him getting signed. his dad follows me on Twitter, and he likes a lot of stuff. Yeah, so he likes a lot of stuff. So you would think he's kind of in it, but you can't count. I don't love what San Antonio did, but you can't. There's about 20 more picks on the board. You have a Wade Phillips coach team. I think they're going to be prepared. None of these picks really, blow my mind or anything like that, though. Cody Latimer replacing Alize Mack. But, Latimer's a great story, but are we really that high on the 32-year-old tight end? Alex Millette, really pumped about him. He's not as old and whatnot, but, is Cody Latimer the guy that we're really pumped up about?
Yeah, I think for them it was interesting because they did take a lot of guys who were roughnecks, but guys who were added in the off season. So, other than I think Bryson Allen, Justice Smith, Millette, they were either depth guys and Beckett. But they're either depth guys or guys who they added in the off season. They added 3 corners, and all 3 of the corners never played for him last year. They were all, Tease Tabor, Quincy Wilson, Kevin Tolliver, guys who stuck, notable NFL guys. I think maybe the Akers thing, they took Cade Warner, and I wonder if that, and they protected Nick Holley. So maybe they view those guys as kind of their slot type.
Well, Warner's a bigger guy. He could play the outside a little bit, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean he's not like Austin Prohl, who Ricky Prohl is giant. Austin is normal human size, who is not protected, by the way.
And they got Turner, Calvin Turner. That's another one that could play the slot. So maybe that's why. But yeah, I kind of thought he would end up finding his way back to San Antonio. But all in all, like I'm higher on it than you are because I think they did a pretty good job before this. Like you look at the guys they protected, and it's like, okay, they already added Bubba Bolden and Bryce Thompson at safety. Jordan Vesey, Stevie Scott. They added some guys before Evan Heim that I think could be legit players for them. Right now, the whole looks decent, and they probably need a few more guys, and they really need to figure out what they're doing at quarterback. But
I think that's where my head lies with this is like, oh, that's all fine and dandy, but who's throwing the ball? And they had so many injuries last year at tackle that even when Jack Cohn was out there and feeling comfortable, it just felt like he had pressure in his face at all the time. Like their tackle position to me was one of the worst in the league. But I'm not, we'll see what happens. Like you said,
they're starting over there.
Right.
All 4 of the tackles I have for them are new. So even like they didn't protect Chidi Okeke, who was like their top tackle all of last year. So
but they got real, they had Abdul Beecham. They had the guy Kai Abashir, who was a Battlehawks offset at one point. It just, to me, nothing really was too exciting. One guy who from San Jose State that they protected, which is Quinn Oslin, he played in the CFL, played in the Spring League. So very curious to see their plans for him. Quinn is a big guy. I've seen him in real life and whatnot. Very curious to see how he translates there. But he not a lot of experience, but they saw something in him that they're pumped that he's there and whatnot. So let's see what's going on with that. There's one other thing I wanted to highlight and Chris Mason brought it up, is that they do have Stevie Scott on this roster. I don't expect Stevie Scott to have 500 plus yards. What I do expect is Stevie Scott to put a licking on people as they come through on that offensive line and really make people pay who are trying to get to Jack Cohn. But this team's going to come down to the quarterback, man. We're going to be licking our chops until we see what's going on with the quarterback. Defensively, Drew Beasley is a guy that kind of came on late in the year. Start seeing his name pop up. They don't take Jack Corner. I thought the safety. I don't remember what school he went to, but he's kind of out there in no man's land. as well. He got traded to Seattle, I believe.
Yeah.
So Nate Wieland, NAIA guy, played with the Patriots for 5 minutes. Got to always shout out our NAIA guys. Anyone else on that secondary or anything that really gets you going, really gets you jazzed up?
I will say, just as a whole, just to kind of cap off this, is that the Brahmas had a lot of guys go to the NFL. So there's a
Yes.
lot of guys hanging around. A quarterback, Reed Sennett, Alize Mack, Delonte Scott, Kobe Smith. How many of those guys are back, we'll see. But even though they're a team that could really go heavy on the additions after the Super Draft and fill out this roster.
Yep, and they got 62 players right now, so they'll have 13 more. Moving down to the Battlehawks, 16 players translate to the NFL from there. About 6 of them stayed. Obviously, A.J. McCarron is the big one that everyone's got their eyes, peeled on with that. Quarterback, they only kept Manny Wilkins and Nick Tiano. I'm very high on Tiano. Three running backs. Receiving core, I feel like got way better. I think there's only one guy that's got the potential of being cut unless one of these guys comes up to camp, and that's James Bostic. But Jamarcus Bradley, Blake Jackson, Ja'Cour Pearson, Stevie Mitchell, who was buried in that depth chart, that could really come up and play a lot more. And obviously Hakeem Hakeem Butler, which people can get really jazzed up about. He did have some drops, but when he caught the ball and was able to get in space, that 6'5" frame, you go by 3-by-1 personnel, put him on an island or even those drag routes. Love this guy, man. Nothing better than some Hakeem Butler. A little bit more athletic at tight end. Kimore Gamble, he's a guy to keep tabs on. He actually played at Florida backing up Kyle Pitts. So very curious to see what he's got in the pipeline as far as his skill set. And then you got Big Jake Sutherland, blocking tight end. He'll be your H-back. And then we can keep going into the offensive line. Magwood looks to be penciled in as the starter, but we'll see what happens when you pick up Sage Dogtax there, and then Coda Martin's a little bit versatile, and then in the interior, Jack Snyder, Donovan West, and Coda Martin can play that guard. So very curious to see where they're at. Is there going to be some reshuffling? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, how I feel about the Battlehawks is kind of how you feel about the Brahmas, where it's all fun and games until they figure out the quarterback. I'm not high on Tejano. I kind of wish they had gone out and gotten another, if they got a Dormandy, I think I'd feel a little bit better, because I'm like, okay, at least if they don't get McCarron, they have somebody I would be okay with. I really don't think he's the solution. But outside of that, they did pretty good. That receiving core, they added Jamarcus Bradley too in the offseason. That's going to be fun. Offensive line wise, they added a lot of starters, a lot of guys who graded out really well last year, to an already pretty good offensive line that only lost one guy in Jared Jones-Smith, who might be back because he didn't get a futures deal.
Yeah.
And then defensively, they didn't add a ton of impact guys. There's a lot of depth guys to me. But Chris Jones, Antoine Jackson, Keelan Kennedy, those are guys who I could totally see starting. And Antoine Jackson was one I was really happy about, because that was another guy I predicted correctly. I didn't get many of them, but I really saw him as a perfect replacement for LaCale London, who went to the NFL.
Yeah, no, that was the first thought that came to my mind. A lot of turnover on that defensive side, especially on the defensive line, and they completely gutted their defensive backfield. Really going to lie heavy on these linebackers to make sure that guys know what they're doing and whatnot. And that kind of scares me, not from a skill set position, but I was really excited to see Johnny Buchanan kind of step in if Mike Rose wasn't able to get there. And Mr. Downtown, appreciate the comment. I don't think that is a part of reality yet, by the way, as far as QBs declaring for the or any player rather declaring for the UFL draft. I think that's awesome, and I think that'd get a lot of buzz on social media if from in Thorne. I think you had him on your list. Zach Zembrowski from Central Missouri getting up on a podium saying, "Hey, I am going to declare for the UFL draft. I want to be a battle hawk." Especially him being at Central Missouri. His father is the KU offensive coordinator. But yeah, I think that'd be pretty rad to have that. But who knows? Not yet. In due time, though, right? In due time. But
Yeah, I'd love to see, the with this portal situation that's kind of getting figured out as we, figure out what the portal era looks like. I'd love to see some of those guys that get lost in the portal declare for a UFL draft. But yeah, I agree. I think we need to kind of get our sea legs under us before we start thinking about that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of Kenny Robinsons out there that, are going to
yeah,
just wind up on your doorstep.
yeah, and I think something that gets lost in Kenny Robinson is that there wasn't NIL back then, and you're telling me, going, you're telling me just from not even a skill set wise, that there are so many people out there who want to air quote do good for selfish reasons. And I'm getting on the soapbox a little bit, but ride with me here. Is you're telling me if Kenny Robinson says I have to go to the UFL because I can't afford to take care of my mother who's got cancer, that somebody like some Mr. Beast or something, maybe not Mr. Beast, obviously, but someone would be like, "Oh, I'm going to help you out, bro. I'm going to give you an NIL deal. Stay at West Virginia." Like, is that outlandish to think maybe at West Virginia? Yeah, a little bit. But on the flip side, if you had that happen just because someone was so passionate about the Mountaineers, it's not the craziest thing in my opinion. I think the portal and NIL has actually hurt these leagues a little bit more.
Yeah, certainly guys are going to stick around in college. You see like the rookies are just, starting to be more 24, 25-year-olds and that's COVID too. But,
Yeah.
It certainly there's not a ton of, 21-year-olds, it feels like, floating around these leagues like there once was, or 22-year-olds, Teabu being 22 when he joined the XFL. I don't think that happens very often anymore.
Yeah, especially him coming from Ole Miss, like that's a guy in my opinion that would have had plenty of money if he really if the option was there, being at a Power 5 school, having a decent career. Like that's a guy who in my opinion would have had plenty of financial benefits from staying at Ole Miss versus the career he's had in the NFL and spring football and whatnot. I'm sure he's made a decent amount of money. Those camp stipends do add up, and rumor was he did have a little bit of a pay boost in the USFL in 2022. But I mean, in the end, if you're paying me 500 grand to stay at Ole Miss, I'm probably going to do it. Yeah. But they did a complete overhaul of their roster, it looks like, in the defensive backfield. Obviously, Alex Matheson, their long snapper, was with the Rams. He just recently got cut, so took a vacation out to LA. No Donnie Hagman right now. Sterling Hoffrichter is still around. But, Brandon Sebastian, Mike Hampton, Ben DeLuca look like the only guys that stick. You got Nate Meters, who's currently on the Steelers practice squad, which because they're making the playoffs, I mean, with how they're playing, man, it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to grab a win. And with this dispersal draft being on January 15th, he might be in no man's land if you don't get him an NFL, if he doesn't get a futures deal. I think he gets picked up, but it's going to take an extra minute or two.
I think he's going to be back in St. Louis if he comes available. I think they'll cut someone else to bring him back because he was a pretty important piece of that defense last year. But, we'll see. He has to come available. He could sign a futures deal, and suddenly that conversation's off the table.
Yeah, and then also Lucas Dennis signing a futures deal. Elijah Hamilton, guy went to the NFL, signs his LOI to come back. He's not back. They cut him. Another guy, Levert Hill, he went to the Steelers. I don't think he signed his LOI, so he never came back as well. You know, a guy I'm excited to see, a little bit older, Anthony Siafi. That's a guy that, you know, played in the USFL, a lot of success in Canada. Really curious to see what he's got going on moving forward. So I'm, you know, glad he's still in the spring football circuit. Keelan Kennedy, another guy, younger guy coming from the JUCO. Prince Charles Awella, another guy, you know, hub workout guy, XFL combine guy, 2016, a bit older, but you know, maybe not as much tread on those legs as you would think, right?
Yeah, I think he was with the Maulers too in 2022.
He was, yeah. I think he's got some NFL experience. Defensive line wise, I know, you know, Pita Tolmopeno is an edge rusher. Really excited to see him paired up with Travis Feeney. Got some dogs in the middle, man. Freedom Akin Modulo, Kevin Atkins, big clog up there. Antoine Jackson can be a good 3 technique or that 3-4 rusher. I mean, outside that secondary, I feel pretty good about this Battlehawks roster and quarterback.
Yeah, quarterback's the one really more. I'm okay with the secondary the way it's at, but you know, safety's a question mark. Are you going to be starting Nico Bolden there? Because you got Ben DeLuca, who I think you're locking in as a starter, but who's the other one would be a question of the, you know, Siafi, Quintero Cole they added, Bolden it was a draft pick. But yeah, all in all, like I think for this point, you know, they're another team that didn't take a ton of players, so you know this roster's going to fill out for sure. They got another 21 players to add. So
yeah, they're only in the 50s, so obviously one of them's a quarterback, but we'll see. We'll see what happens on the on the back end of it. So those are all the rosters. You know, it only took us an hour and a half. Who are free agents? Who we touched on some of them, but who are free agents?
Yeah, so you know, you might be pulling up the list right now, but
yeah.
I've been kind of compiling them. So as it comes up, the names in white are guys who didn't get drafted, and the names in black are guys who didn't get protected. And you know, you'll see a key on the side there with that. But yeah, I mean, we'll start at quarterback. I think you know, while he's pulling it up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got analysts. It's not right now. Let me.
Okay.
My Excel is not excelling right now, so let me pull it up. Yeah, through my Office. I'm gonna pull it up through the Office, like through my web browser, and then. But if you just want to start, you know, going down.
Yeah. I'll talk about some of the quarterbacks. And I split it up between XFL and USFL, but it is one pool now. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind that, you know, the top players from each of them are available. So, you know, there's a few starters available from the XFL side. Quentin Dormandy, Jalen McClendon, Brandon Silvers, guys who got legit starting. Brett Hundley too, but I think Hundley's probably done. Yeah, there we go. And then, you know, some other guys, Steven Montez. You know, I think you're a fan of Darren Hart, Connor Darren Hart.
Yeah, I mean that kid to me is, you know, physical tools, decently mobile. Really disappointed to see him. Really disappointed to see him not a part of this league right now. I think this league is perfect for him. Had some NFL interest, but we'll see. We'll see what's going on. And yes, Chris, I have a I don't even know how to describe this. A cheetah Hawaiian, and it's got glops in there as well, or Berettas in there as well. You know, be real edgy on that.
Yeah. So I think there's like, I mean, more than and you can flip over to the USFL if I don't know how you want to do XFL first or just do position by position.
We could go position by position.
So I think there's a lot more talent on the XFL side left. Also, just teams in the XFL took less players, so that's probably a good part of it. But Eric Berrier, Akil Glass were guys who were developmental guys and who have been around in the league. And then Troy Williams and Carson Strong are like the only two really left, and Sloter too. Sloter's probably put in that tier of guys who have actually gotten some legit playing time in the league. I think Strong's probably done. He's another guy that I just would be surprised if he ends up.
Yeah, and he's coaching right now. He started off at Colorado State with Jay Norvell, and then went to Nevada. So I'm not really sure if he's in a full-time role. But they also had on Colorado or Nevada's roster, they also had Gabriel Sewell listed on their coaching staff as well as a volunteer assistant. So I don't really know what that means as far as what they got going on. I think if Strong gets a call to start, he comes back, but he's got a baby. He wants to be a coach. He's been around.
Knee. That's the thing that keeps getting back to me. Like,
my God, that knee, dude. And you could see it in warm-ups. He wouldn't break a certain plane, like angle, and they would post this stuff on their social media, and I'm like, bro, he is not okay. Like, he is not driving through. He's not pushing that ball the way he can, man.
Yeah, that's sad. It's sad that he even needs a spring league. He's one of those guys who you thought was going to be a
first round. Yeah, you thought he was a first round pick a couple of years ago. I mean, Carson Strong is, in my opinion, one of the sad stories of this, and I hate being like that, but it's the reality of the situation. Like I'm, he's a sad story. Like but he seems like a real nice guy. Just the flex, I was the first one to break those news, last year, but not that any of that matters anymore.
Yeah, and then
you got Tom Flacco still out there.
I want to see Tom Flacco on a team, man. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
But that's just mostly, again, Towson
ties.
Yeah. But unless you got anything more of the quarterback, so I can move to running back.
Just wanted to highlight two guys, the Guardians guys. Quinn Dormandy, I feel, is a caliber, a top 5 guy in the XFL last year, meaning I think he is a top 16 quarterback, which, if you go off the quarterback depth of obviously every team has about 2 or a minimum 2, he should be in this league. Real unfortunate situation, tough guy, dealt with a lot of adversity last year. And then someone to keep tabs on, Todd Centerio. I think it's time, get ready to learn French, buddy. See you up in Canada. Apparently he's got some options, but it's kind of a shame because this league was perfect for him. But, let's read about him in Canada. He comes down in a couple of years because he wants to be closer to his family, and I'm sure we'll see that all over ESPN.
Yeah. So moving the running back, the Vipers running back isn't completely intact. Rod Smith, DeAndre Torrey, Kylan Hill is another one that I was really excited to see in a league like this. But former 7th round pick for the Packers. I was excited to see what he had, but hasn't been taken yet. Philip Lindsay obviously is a notable name, probably more of a notable name than anything else right now. But that's kind of all the guys on that I'm really looking at. It's not the running backs, in my opinion, were better in the USFL than the XFL as a whole.
DeAndre Torrey's a guy I liked. Some NFL looks. Jermaine Martin was another guy that I felt kind of had his highs and lows in the league. Puka Williams is a versatile guy. He was with the Battlehawks at one point, I believe. Thought that guy was going to pop a lot harder than he really did. A little bit disappointed on his front that, never really found a role for himself, even on special teams. Kingston Davis, last chance you guy. Everyone's got to, show a little bit of love to him. Really ran the ball hard in his limited opportunities. Um, Dexter Williams, another guy, versatile, he's a Notre Dame guy, I believe, was
Mhm.
with the Packers at one point. Madre London, I felt like a lot of people were really high on him. I think he lacked a lot of explosive speed. Everyone talks about his career in Europe. I mean, it's Europe. Nothing against those guys, but you're only playing against 4 Division I athletes, and one or two guys who just started playing football when they were a teenager. Uh, Corbin, let's see what happens with him. I think he's out there. Yeah, you're right. Puka Williams did recently get into some legal troubles. What's the saying? It's the best like way to make a team is availability or something like that. Like,
Abilities, availability.
yeah, the best ability is availability. So, Puka, very curious to see on his career. Zaquandre White spent a decent amount of time with Miami. I think he was on the practice squad for a little bit. That was a guy that I think really, when he had the opportunity with the Stallions, but behind any of these guys, offensive line that they had, I'd probably do pretty okay. And in Scarborough, like you said, is that a guy that they kind of pick back up, they kind of poach and whatnot? Very curious to see where he lines up. So running backs, as far as guys I need, I'd break it down to Scarborough, Davis, and on the XFL side, I go to DeAndre Torrey, and that's really it. No one else is like my guy gets hurt or my guy doesn't want to play. Those are my guys. A personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also throw Trey Williams' name in there just because he's been around in a lot of these leagues. Had a down year last year, but you just go back a year, he was one, I think, like third in rushing in the USFL in 2022. So
I think there was some character nonsense that really happened. He was pretty
he really,
vocal.
yeah, he really did not like that offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
he made that known.
yeah, and you can have a mouth, man. No one cares about that, but what they care about is are you good? People put up with BS, but you got to be able to write the checks. Going to the XFL receivers, we talked about Landon Akers a little bit. I mean, I see that guy getting picked up. Cody Crest, I think he was highlighted on Hard Knocks a little bit. He's a Cutstown guy, small school prospect. Let's see what he's got going on. This Vipers receiving core between Badet, Allison, and Sweeting, a bunch of guys I really like as well. Going down to the Guardians, Dan Williams, he was a top receiver in the XFL 2020. Nothing really going on this year. Jawan Green and Kelvin McKnight, guys I could see definitely getting looks. Jadarius Townsend, Texas Tech guy at one point. I believe he was at Alabama as well. That's your shifty kick returner guy. Very curious to see where if he gets another opportunity. Was pretty pumped that they picked him up. But moving forward, we'll see what happens on that front.
Yeah, for XFL guys, for me, you hit the head on a lot of them. And Brennan Arcanato, Austin Proles, guys we mentioned earlier, is guys who were legit players for teams last year. Malachi Weidman, I think, was like a supplemental draft guy. He didn't get picked, but I think he came through that process. Fred Brown was a pretty good returner,
Yeah.
and then flipping over to the USFL side.
Oh, you can't forget Austin Prohl as well.
Yeah.
He's got experience, shifty guy. Might be a guy that the Battlehawks pick up like, hey, we're gonna come grab you once more type thing as well. That's a guy, if he still wants to play, that's someone I could see getting, picked back up by St. Louis as well. Wide receiver core for the USFL pool.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Joe Walker's the one who stands out the most because he was so productive last year,
Despite his drops.
Yeah, locked down by Mark Gilbert. But Lee Morris is another one that has been productive. Alonzo Moore. Chris Rowland's another one. He said, "Don't draft me." So far, his wishes have happened. We'll see where he ends up. Bailey Gaither's another one. One guy I want to highlight that a little maybe lesser known, at least in spring football spaces, is Dante Demas. I was really excited to see what he could be in spring football. He might be another Carson Strong type with injuries, because he had some serious injuries at Maryland and college. But he was a guy who had some legit, maybe day 3 into day 2 hype. Had he stayed healthy, I think he's a 5-star. That if he can, he was with the Ravens in the preseason, but wasn't able to stick really. He's a guy who I think could be interesting if he's able to make it all. If things can come together for him, he's someone I'm really gonna watch.
Yeah, Ish Hyman, a guy who's been around some leagues. He was at the AAF, played with the Bucks. I know he has NFL receptions and whatnot. Josh Simmons, kick returner, did some good stuff as well. Osiris Mitchell from Stallions, and he was with the Showboats. Pro guy, had an NFL stint in 2022. AJ Richardson, versatile guy. Stallions kind of cleaned house with their receiving core a little bit. Payne Ramsey, Myron Mitchell, Josh Johnson, Adrian Hardy, all guys who have been around for a minute. So maybe a lot of these guys, man, I think they're doing some good stuff as far as being available if need be type thing. Like once injuries start piling up. Cam Eccles-Looper, another guy that been around going back to the spring league. DeMornay Petersonell and Alonzo Moore, 2 older guys. Not really sure if they kind of stick around anymore. I think their time has kind of passed. Fun fact: Alonzo Moore has over 1,000 receiving yards in spring football. One of very few players, if not the only player, to do that. So moving the tight ends, Cyber, Stocky, 2 guys to be pretty high on. Mason Stocky, obviously H-back, very versatile. Special teams, Thad Moss, a guy who has the NFL lineage with his father, and then pushing down, a lot of tight ends on the outs with the XFL. Jalen Smith. We talked about all the tight ends from the Renegades. Guys to keep tabs on. Luke Ford, someone people were high on from Illinois as well. So I'm very curious to see what happens on that front.
Yeah, I think the only one I'd add is Jaleel Billingsley is another guy that I've seen some hype for. I think he was at Bama. He hasn't played yet, but he's another guy that I think people have been interested in.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap this up a little bit. People are kind of pushing out, guys. If you're new, obviously drop a like, subscribe. Appreciate all the support. BJ Wilson on offensive tackle, Gunnar Vogel, another guy to really keep tabs on. From the XFL side, no one else really sticks out in my mind. Personally, I think Vogel was with DC. Another guy I could see them bring back. Micah Vanderpool. He's a guy that was with the Patriots for a little bit. Then you push on to Broderius Ham, obviously a cancer survivor. Keith Williams, a lot of experience with the Panthers over the last 2 years. Tackle, I think they got right outside of BJ Wilson, and I'm very biased, small school guy, and I interviewed him. I think they got right, and then there are some good players out there still.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. The only one I'll add is Cody Conway. He got hurt last year, but he was an offensive lineman that graded out pretty well. He's a guy who I think if given the chance, he could potentially be a solid spring football tackle.
Yeah, going to guard, Burrell, kind of that versatile guard center. Denzel Okafor, a lot of NFL workouts coming from the University of Texas. On the USFL side, Mike Miller is retired, so he is done playing football. It's you got a guy like Deshaun Dixon and Maya Tuahima. And I don't see you having him on this list, but you have him as a center, Koroma. Koroma's running a gym, so I could see him kind of being good with it, and he's doing a lot of training with a lot of people. So I could see y'all being done with him on that front. Jared Thomas, that's that's a name that's come up a couple times on the center position, and then John Yarborough at center as well. Those are a couple guys from that guard center, in addition to Sean Brown, as those are my guys that I kind of pop in my mind.
Yeah, I was really surprised that Cleo McKenzie didn't end up somewhere. Maybe it was injuries, but he played pretty well for the Vipers when he was healthy. He's a guy who I could totally see going somewhere and being a legit guy. He's been in spring football for a while now. I think he was on the Wildcats in 2020.
Yeah. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, really Willie Henry's from the Stallions is the guy that I really look towards. These Gamblers defensive ends, defensive linemen, Josh Avery, a SEMO guy, FCS, and Damian Daniels. He's got a twin brother, Darren, that's also been in the XFL, bounce around spring leagues. Both Nebraska guys. Those are two guys. Jordan Scott as well is another one that I could see kind of coming in later or getting picked up. On the XFL side, Kayvon Walker, Gerald Willis, Jacoby Jones, all guys that had pretty good success. Robert Windsor, a big guy, and we can't talk enough about TJ Barnes. What do you think his deal is?
I think with Barnes, it's probably a case of he's a vet that they think they can see through because he's like 34, I think.
Yeah.
I would not be shocked if he's back in Arlington, but we'll see. Obviously, I love him in DC, but we'll see on that. But I mean, other than that, Roberts is another one, a fan favorite.
Yep.
But good. I don't think Trayvon Mason played pretty well for the Roughnecks last year. Sama Panma was on player 54.
Yeah,
21 years old. He's like really young. But other than that, I think that kind of hits on all the notable guys there.
Yeah, Eric Hansen's a guy, very versatile, athletic pass rusher that I could see being picked up by the Battlehawks. They really liked him a lot as a depth piece. And then two guys they got rid of, Tony Topo and Galen Robinson, two guys that also have been playing in the spring league in the AAF, the XFL 2020. Topo is a professional rugby player as well, so you have to think he kind of had a swan song last year, and they're both a little bit older. Going into the edge, talked about Jacoby Jones. Max Roberts had a lot of success. Silas Kelly's a guy that was a fan favorite in St. Louis. Maybe he kind of sneaks back with the team. Ryan Mueller, older guy, K-State guy. Maybe he comes back to the Renegades as a depth piece, outside linebacker. Actually, I think scored the first defensive touchdown in XFL 2020. Moving to the USFL side, really no one really pops off my board except for Nate Holley, and that's basically because of experience more than anything else.
Yeah, I'll say Big Cat Bryant is one that I had I was really excited to see last year. Didn't end up cracking the starting spot in Memphis and new coaching staff, but he's someone that I'd like to see if maybe he gets an opportunity at some point.
Yeah. Going into the defensive backfield for USFL, and I'm sorry guys, we are kind of flying through this. We've been on this stream for 2 hours. How did the Panthers not just answer that? Protect Ginda. He was on the practice squad for the Falcons. So we'll see what happens with that. Paris Ford, feel like he's a guy that could really, pop once again. He's been a pretty solid safety. Antonio Fletcher, Malcolm Elmore, Christian McFarland, Cody Brown, all guys with a lot of experience playing in the USFL. Cornerback, I mean, for the USFL side, man, Brian Allen, Nate Brooks, those are the two guys just because of their championship pedigrees on that front. Moving to the XFL side, safety, we talked about him, Jack Corner, guy I'm pretty high on. Matt Elam, I believe, signed a indoor football contract. Shakur Brown, NFL experience, spring league experience. Devontae Ballsby, same thing. Josh Hawkins had that nasty knee injury, so I kind of think he might be on the outs. Will Likely, I think he was an all USFL guy or all XFL guy, real dynamic playmaker. Would love to see him back, but he is getting a bit older. Um, and then there's also Joe Powell is another guy who we didn't see protected as well. Really curious to see. Cameron Kelly did get so. No, Cameron Kelly did not get selected. Really, no one. I mean, there's guys there, man, but no one that's popping off for me. What about you?
I'm gonna say 3 Maryland safeties that I think all 3 of them. I really mostly Antone Brooks is the one that I'm like, I cannot believe this guy did not get taken. To me, he was one of the better safeties in the XFL last year. I thought he was, he's anyone could use him. He's very versatile, can play free or strong. But also Sean Davis and AJ Henday were the starting safeties for the Roughnecks last year. And maybe it's a case of, the Brahmas are just going to wait to use their super draft picks on them. But I was a little surprised that, them and Likely, those 3 guys not getting taken at all. I know they're older, but that kind of was something I was a little surprised those guys falling through. Maybe, they're done playing football. We'll see. But, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Going to specialist, man, so such a weird spot to really break down, in my opinion, because you have so many guys that were signed to practice squads and NFL teams that's a position I could see a lot of turnover in, where they kind of go outside the pool. Aguilar pops to me, Matt White pops to me, Coughlin pops to me. Long snapper, we could see some familiar faces come back from 2022. Navarro's got plenty of experience. Langen's got plenty of experience. Does Alex Matheson come back to St. Louis? Brian Corey's been around for a minute. Does he come back, or does he get picked up? Hagman, we talked about him as well. Does he join St. Louis on that back end? Very curious to see what a lot of these guys got going on. And do they go outside the pool? Carazosa, another guy, USFL guy. Good punter, can't kick, but very good punter.
Yeah, I think if the trio of Coughlin, Aguilar, and Murphy if none of those 3 get picked up, I'd be shocked. I think those are the 3 that I'm really looking at for guys coming back. Eberle too, but yeah, so not much more else to say about the specialists.
Yeah, I mean, guys, we've been on this stream for about 2 hours, so kind of ran through the back end of that point. Appreciate everyone checking in, y'all. It was fun to do it. A lot of work. Appreciate Mr. Thorne coming on. Working his tail off. I'm working my tail off on a lot of this stuff. But yeah, guys, really appreciate coming on and kick it out. If you're new here, please drop a like, subscribe. Really helps us out. Channel's been growing like rapid fire. We'll probably do a stream after the 15th as well. I got some work coming up, so might be a little bit less active on the social medias, but Nick, please drop your socials real quick. Guys, I just had 2 interviews with BJ Wilson and Quinn Sig, so appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on I just changed my handle to Thorn PFN on Twitter, so that's where I don't tweet a ton, but that's where I retweet all my articles. So if you want to look at it, I'm doing that, that'll be there. But other than that, happy to be here. Get invited back at some point, but yeah, this has been fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Thorne. And with that being said, guys, please drop a like, subscribe. Appreciate all y'all.